2 children's bodies were found buried in a backyard in rural Idaho, wrapped in plastic, hidden beneath the earth like discarded secrets. Their mother was in Hawaii, newlywed, dancing on beaches while investigators dug through the dirt where her son and daughter had been concealed for months. This isn't just a story about murder. This is about how belief can become delusion, how love can twist into something unrecognizable, and how a mother's embrace can turn into a grave. The case of Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell didn't begin with bodies in the ground. It began with whispers of the end times, with visions of darkness and light, with a woman who believed she could see beyond the veil of mortality and decided who deserved to cross it. September 2019, Rexburg, Idaho. A small town where neighbors know each other's names, where children ride bikes down quiet streets, where nothing terrible is supposed to happen. But J.J. Vallow, a 7-year-old boy with autism and an infectious smile, stopped going to school. His sister, Tylee Ryan, 16 years old with her whole life stretching before her, vanished from social media, from family gatherings, from existence itself. When relatives asked where the children were, Lori had answers. Smooth answers. Practiced answers. JJ was with his grandmother in Louisiana. Tylee was visiting friends at college. The explanations shifted like sand, never quite solid, never quite true. By November, when police finally knocked on Lori's door to perform a welfare check, she smiled. She was calm. She told them the children were safe, that they were fine, that there was nothing to worry about. The next day, she and her new husband Chad Daybell fled to Hawaii, leaving behind an apartment full of the children's belongings, toys that would never be played with again, clothes that would never be worn, a life interrupted mid-sentence. Would you have believed her? If you were the neighbor, the teacher, the friend, would those smooth explanations have satisfied you? Or would something in your gut have screamed that this was wrong? The investigation that followed peeled back layers of a reality so disturbing that seasoned detectives struggled to comprehend it. This wasn't a crime of passion or a moment of rage. This was methodical. This was planned. This was a mother who looked at her children and saw obstacles to a divine destiny she believed she was meant to fulfill. Lori Vallow wasn't always the woman who would become known as the Doomsday Mother. She grew up in California, married young, had children, divorced, remarried. On the surface, she seemed like so many others, navigating the complexities of blended families, seeking meaning, searching for something to believe in. But somewhere along the way, that search took a turn into darkness. She met Chad Daybell at a religious conference in 2018. He was an author of apocalyptic fiction, a man who claimed to have visions of the end times, who spoke of multiple mortal probations and the battle between light and dark. He was married. She was married. But according to the belief system they constructed together, their spouses were obstacles, dark spirits inhabiting human bodies, preventing them from fulfilling their sacred mission. The psychology here is crucial. Lori didn't wake up one morning and decide to kill. She built a framework of belief that made murder not just acceptable, but necessary. She created a cosmology where she and Chad were warriors of light, where certain people, including her own children, were possessed by dark entities, where removing them from this world was an act of salvation, not destruction. This is how the human mind justifies the unjustifiable. This is how a mother looks at her child and sees an enemy. In the months before the children disappeared, Lori's behavior shifted in ways that those close to her couldn't ignore. She became obsessed with preparing for the end times, stockpiling food and supplies. She spoke constantly about visions and revelations. She rated people on a scale of light and dark, assigning numerical values to their spiritual worthiness. Her own children, JJ and Tylee, were increasingly described as dark or possessed. Her brother, Alex Cox, became her enforcer. In July 2019, he shot and killed Lori's 4th husband, Charles Vallow, in what he claimed was self-defense. Charles had been trying to get help for Lori, had told police she believed she was a god preparing for the second coming of Christ, had begged someone to see that his wife was losing her grip on reality. He died in Alex's apartment in Arizona, and the shooting was ruled justified. No charges were filed. 2 months later, the children disappeared. Could this happen in your neighborhood? Could someone you know be constructing a reality so divorced from truth that murder becomes a holy act? The search for JJ and Tylee consumed law enforcement through the winter of 2019 and into 2020. Lori and Chad, meanwhile, were living in a beachfront condo in Kauai, posting photos of themselves smiling, embracing, celebrating their new life together, Chad's wife, Tammy Daybell, had died suddenly in October 2019, just weeks before Chad married Lori. The death had been ruled natural at first, but as the investigation into the missing children deepened, Tammy's body was exhumed. The autopsy would later reveal she had been asphyxiated. The pattern was becoming clear. Anyone who stood between Lori and Chad and their apocalyptic destiny ended up dead. In February 2020, Lori was arrested in Hawaii and extradited to Idaho. She refused to produce the children, refused to cooperate, maintained that they were safe, and that she was being persecuted for her beliefs. Her attorney argued that she was a loving mother being unfairly targeted. The media coverage intensified. The public demanded answers. Where were JJ and Tylee? The answer came in June 2020, when investigators executed a search warrant on Chad Daybell's property in Salem, Idaho. They brought cadaver dogs. They brought ground-penetrating radar. They brought the grim certainty that they were looking for bodies, not living children. The dogs alerted near a fire pit. Investigators began to dig. What they found was JJ's small body, wrapped in plastic bags and duct tape, buried in a shallow grave. His arms had been bound. Nearby, they found Tylee's remains, burned, dismembered, scattered. The brutality of it was incomprehensible. These were children. These were human beings who had trusted the adults in their lives to protect them. The sensory details from that excavation haunt the investigators who were there. The smell of disturbed earth. A silence that fell over the property as the first remains were uncovered. The sound of grown men weeping as they realized what they were looking at. The weight of knowing that a mother had done this or allowed this to be done to her own children. Chad Daybell was arrested immediately. He showed no emotion as he was led away in handcuffs. Lori, already in custody, was charged with conspiracy to commit murder, first-degree murder, and grand theft. The evidence against them was overwhelming text messages discussing the children as zombies, financial records showing. Lori collecting Social Security benefits for children she knew were dead. Cell phone data placing both Lori and Chad's brother Alex Cox at the burial site. Alex Cox, the brother who had killed Charles Vallow, who had been present when the children disappeared, who likely helped bury them, died in December 2019 of what was ruled natural causes, a blood clot. Some investigators believe it was too convenient, that perhaps he knew too much, that perhaps he was another obstacle removed. But with him dead, certain answers died too. What pushes a mother to cross this line? What happens in the human psyche when belief becomes so absolute that reality itself becomes negotiable? Forensic psychologists who have studied the case point to several factors. Lori exhibited signs of grandiose delusions. She genuinely believed she was a divine being with a sacred mission. She showed a complete lack of empathy for her victims, including her own children, which suggests severe personality pathology, possibly narcissistic or antisocial personality disorder. She was able to compartmentalize her actions, to separate the horror of what she was doing from her self-image as a righteous person. But perhaps most chilling is the folie à deux, this shared psychosis between Lori and Chad. Together, they reinforced each other's delusions, built an echo chamber where their most extreme beliefs were validated and amplified. They created a reality where murder was martyrdom, where death was deliverance, where the end justified any means. This is the danger of unchecked belief, of communities that don't question, of isolation that allows delusion to flourish. Lori and Chad didn't operate in a complete vacuum. They had friends, family, a religious community, but no one stopped them. No one intervened forcefully enough. The warning signs were there, flashing red, and still the children died. The trial process has been lengthy and complex. Lori was initially found incompetent to stand trial and was committed to a mental health facility for treatment. She was later deemed competent and faced trial in 2023. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence, the text messages, the financial records, the testimony of family members who described Lori's increasingly bizarre behavior, the forensic evidence from the burial site. The defense attempted to argue that Lori was under Chad's influence, that she was a victim of his manipulation. But the evidence showed a willing participant, a woman who actively engaged in the conspiracy, who lied repeatedly about her children's whereabouts, who collected their benefits while they lay dead in the ground. In May 2023, Lori Vallow Daybell was found guilty on all counts: 2 counts of first-degree murder for JJ and Tylee, 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder in the death of Tammy Daybell, and grand theft. The jury deliberated for less than 7 hours. The verdict was unanimous. She showed no reaction as it was read. No tears. No emotion. Just the same blank expression she had worn throughout the trial, as if she were watching something happening to someone else. As if the reality of her actions still couldn't penetrate the fortress of delusion she had built around herself. The judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In his remarks, he spoke directly to the horror of what she had done, to the betrayal of the most fundamental bond that between mother and child. He spoke of JJ, who had special needs, who depended on his mother for everything, who trusted her completely. He spoke of Tylee, who was on the cusp of adulthood, who had her whole life stolen from her. Chad Daybell's trial followed. He faced the death penalty. The prosecution argued that he was the architect of the ideology that led to the murders, that he manipulated Lori into believing their spouses and her children needed to die. The defense painted him as a delusional author who believed his own fiction but didn't actually commit murder. The jury didn't buy it. In May 2024, Chad Daybell was convicted of first-degree murder in the deaths of Tylee Ryan J.J. Vallow and his wife Tammy Daybell. He was sentenced to death. He will likely spend years on death row, appealing, waiting, while the families of his victims live with the permanent absence of the people they loved. But the story doesn't end with convictions and sentences. The psychological aftermath ripples outward, touching everyone connected to this case. Jay's grandparents, who fought desperately to find him, who knew something was wrong, who couldn't save him. Tylee's father's family, who lost a vibrant young woman to a mother's madness. The surviving children from Lori's previous marriages, who have to reconcile the mother they knew with the monster she became. And there are broader questions that haunt this case. How many other Lori Vallows are out there, building their own apocalyptic belief systems, rating their loved ones on scales of light and dark? How many children are at risk right now from parents who have lost touch with reality but haven't yet acted on their delusions? The warning signs in Lori's case were clear in retrospect. The escalating religious extremism. The sudden deaths of people close to her. The lies about her children's whereabouts. The financial motivation: she was collecting benefits for dead children, had life insurance policies on her deceased husband. But in the moment, people rationalized, made excuses, didn't want to believe that a mother could be capable of such evil. This is the cognitive dissonance we all face when confronted with unthinkable acts by seemingly ordinary people. We want to believe that monsters look like monsters, that we would recognize evil when we see it. But Lori Vallow looked like a suburban mom. She was attractive, articulate, socially adept. She didn't fit our mental image of a child killer. That's what makes this case so terrifying. The banality of it, the ordinariness of the setting. The fact that it happened in a small Idaho town, in a religious community, among people who believed they were righteous and good. The forensic evidence from the burial site revealed details that are almost too horrific to process. Jay's body showed signs that he had been alive when he was bound and wrapped in plastic. Tylee's remains were so badly burned and dismembered that investigators initially thought they might be animal bones. The level of violence, the deliberate destruction of these children's bodies, speaks to a rage and a coldness that defies comprehension. What was Lori thinking as she allowed this to happen? Was she present when they died? Did she participate directly, or did she simply give the order and let others carry it out? These questions may never be fully answered. Lori has never shown remorse, never explained herself beyond the framework of her delusional belief system. In jail, she has reportedly remained convinced of her righteousness. She believes she will be vindicated, that the truth of her divine mission will eventually be revealed. This is the nature of true delusion. It is impervious to evidence, to reason, to the reality of dead children buried in a backyard. Psychologists who have studied family annihilators and parents who kill their children identify several common factors. Often there is a precipitating stressor: financial problems, relationship issues, loss of status. There is usually a distorted belief system that justifies the killing. The children are better off dead. They're preventing the parent from achieving something important. They're possessed or evil. And there is almost always a profound narcissism, an inability to see the children as separate individuals with their own right to exist. Lori Vallow checks every box. She was facing financial pressure. Her relationship with Charles was falling apart, and he was threatening to expose her delusions. She had constructed a belief system where her children were obstacles to her divine destiny. And she exhibited textbook narcissism. Everything was about her, her mission, her importance in the cosmic battle between good and evil. But knowing the psychological factors doesn't make it less horrifying. It doesn't bring JJ and Tylee back. It doesn't undo the terror they must have felt in their final moments, the betrayal of realizing that the person who was supposed to protect them was the one who was going to kill them. The community of Rexburg, Idaho, has been forever changed by this case. The house where Lori lived with the children before they disappeared has been demolished. Chad Daybell's property, where the bodies were found, stands as a grim monument to what happened there. People drive by slowly, trying to understand how such evil could exist in their quiet town. The religious community that Lori and Chad were part of has had to grapple with difficult questions. How did their beliefs enable this? Were there doctrines or practices that made it easier for Lori and Chad to justify their actions? The mainstream Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has been clear that Lori and Chad's beliefs were not sanctioned, that they had twisted doctrine into something unrecognizable. But the fringe elements of any religious community can be breeding grounds for extremism when there's no accountability. No reality check, no one willing to say, this has gone too far. Would you have seen the warning signs? If Lori Vallow was your neighbor, your friend, your sister, would you have known? Or would you have rationalized the red flags, told yourself that people grieve differently, that religious belief is personal, that it's not your place to judge? These are uncomfortable questions because they force us to confront our own capacity for denial, our own reluctance to intervene in other people's lives, our own desire to believe that everything is fine when all evidence suggests otherwise. The media coverage of this case has been intense and sustained. It has all the elements that capture public attention: attractive defendants, religious extremism, missing children, a dramatic search, a shocking discovery. But beneath the sensationalism is a profound tragedy. 2 children are dead. A woman who was supposed to love them killed them instead. And a community has to live with the knowledge that this happened in their midst. The final twist in this case is that there may be more victims. Investigators have looked into other deaths connected to Lori and Chad. Lori's third husband, Joseph Ryan, who died in 2018 of what was ruled a heart attack. Charles Vallow's death, which was ruled self-defense but looks increasingly suspicious. Tammy Daybell's death, which was initially ruled natural but was actually murder. Alex Cox's death, which may not have been as natural as it appeared. How many people died to clear the path for Lori and Chad's apocalyptic romance? How many lives were sacrificed on the altar of their delusion? The full body count may never be known. As Lori sits in prison, serving her life sentence, does she ever have moments of clarity? Does she ever see her children's faces and feel the weight of what she's done? Or is she still lost in the fantasy, still believing she's a warrior of light being persecuted by dark forces? The psychological literature on remorseless killers suggests that true insight is rare. People who commit acts like this often maintain their distorted worldview even in the face of overwhelming evidence. They rewrite history, blame others, cast themselves as victims. Lori has shown no signs of breaking through her delusion, no indication that she grasps the magnitude of her crimes. And perhaps that's the most chilling aspect of this entire case. Not just that a mother killed her children, but that she did it without remorse, without doubt, with absolute certainty that she was doing the right thing. That level of conviction, that imperviousness to reality, that complete absence of empathy, it's the stuff of nightmares. The families of JJ and Tylee have had to find ways to live with this loss. JJ's grandparents, Larry and Kay Woodcock, who fought tirelessly to find him, who knew something was wrong when Lori's explanations didn't add up, who had to identify his small body when it was finally found. They have become advocates for children's safety, working to change laws and systems that failed to protect their grandson. Tylee's aunt, Annie Cushing, has been vocal about the warning signs that were missed, the opportunities for intervention that were squandered. She has spoken about the vibrant, funny, intelligent young woman that Tylee was, the future that was stolen from her. These family members carry a double burden: grief for the children they lost and guilt that they couldn't save them. It's a weight that will never fully lift, a wound that will never fully heal. The case has also raised questions about the intersection of mental illness, religious extremism, and violence. Lori was clearly delusional, but was she legally insane? The court said no, she understood that what she was doing was wrong in the eyes of the law. Even if she believed it was right in the eyes of God, this distinction is crucial in criminal justice, but it feels inadequate when trying to understand how a human being becomes capable of such acts. The truth is that evil is rarely pure. It's usually a mixture of mental illness, personality disorder, environmental factors, belief systems, and choices. Lori Vallow made choices. She chose to embrace an extremist ideology. She chose to see her children as obstacles. She chose to participate in their deaths. Mental illness may have made those choices easier, but it didn't make them inevitable. As this case recedes from the headlines, as the news cycle moves on to the next horror, JJ and Tylee remain dead. Their graves are permanent. Their absence is permanent. The lives they should have lived, JJ growing up, learning, maybe overcoming some of the challenges of his autism. Tylee graduating high school, going to college, falling in love, building a life, all of that is gone, erased by a mother who believed she was serving a higher purpose. If you're still watching, still trying to understand how this happened, you're grappling with one of the most fundamental questions of human existence. How do we become monsters? The answer is both simple and complex. We become monsters when we stop seeing other people as fully human, when we construct belief systems that justify cruelty, when we surround ourselves with people who reinforce our worst impulses, when we choose our own desires over the lives of others. Lori Vallow is a monster. But she's a human monster, and that's what makes her so terrifying. She's not an aberration from another species. She's one of us who went wrong, who took a path that led to unthinkable evil. And if it can happen to her, if a suburban mother can become a child killer, then we have to ask ourselves, what safeguards do we have? What would stop us from going down a similar path if we started to lose our grip on reality? The answer has to be connection, accountability, and the courage to intervene when we see someone spiraling. It has to be a willingness to question extreme beliefs, to challenge delusions, to say this is not okay, even when it's uncomfortable. It has to be a society that values children's safety over parental rights. That takes warning signs seriously. That doesn't wait until it's too late. JJ and Tylee deserve better. They deserved a mother who loved them more than she loved her delusions. They deserved adults who protected them instead of enabling their killer. They deserved to live. The case of Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell is closed. The convictions are final. The sentences are being served. But the questions it raises remain open, haunting, urgent. In a world where belief can become delusion, where love can twist into murder, where mothers can kill their children, how do we protect the vulnerable? How do we recognize evil before it acts? How do we live with the knowledge that monsters look like us? These are the questions that will outlive the headlines, that will persist long after the details of this case fade from public memory. Because somewhere, right now, another person is constructing a reality divorced from truth. Another child is at risk from a parent who has lost touch with sanity. Another tragedy is waiting to unfold. The only question is whether we'll see it coming this time. If you want to keep exploring the darkest corners of the human mind, subscribe. If you can handle what comes next. Because the truth is, cases like this aren't rare. They're just rarely caught. And the next story might be even closer to home than you think.